Okay, this is Anthonis Kanedakis, one of the many Greeks on campus. And Anthonis joined in January and was immediately bombarded with a major bid that he helped us submit. So we are extremely grateful that he arrived at the right time. And we'll find out hopefully soon if we got it. And his work is wonderful because it really does combine both some of the streams we have in IKD. It's both intra-organizational as well as sort of inter-sectoral. And of course, because of FinOm and some of the other finance-related projects like RAFES, it's great for us to be able to think about financial markets in the context of inter-organizational change, which I personally have never really thought about. So I'm not going to say much more except for just give some background information that his PhD was at Edinburgh, and in fact he worked with Robin Williams, which many of us know from Inogen. And the title was The Agora of Techno-Organizational Change, and I can say that his referees all said that they are now using this theory, which is Anthonis' theory basically, so I think it would be really good if you could first give us a little introduction on that, because I know that people like Robin and others have really found it very illuminating. And his MA was instead at the University of Kingston in Canada, and that was on the human factor problem and post-Fordism, the case of the auto industry. And when we recently met to talk about some research, I was trying to press him on that, because of course anyone who thinks about sort of Fordism and post-Fordism also thinks about sort of inequality type issues because of a lot, well, I don't know, Benjamin Kodiak's work, but and so we've been thinking about also relating some of this work to some IKD projects that we have right now in innovation and inequality. So, without further ado.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, everybody, for coming here today. I should warn you that this is not going to be a very coherent presentation. So, by the end of it, you should be a bit confused, but also it should maybe inspire you for some contribution in the second part of the discussion. Basically, this is about how my previous work can fit in with the research themes in FinOp and IKD, and it has a lot of self-reflection in the sense of trying to find a place for my work here in this institution. In this presentation I will discuss the technological and organizational aspects of financial innovation, or how I understand it better, the innovation of the financial system or financial markets. And I will ask whether these types of innovation, technological and organizational innovation, can be considered when addressing issues of financialization that the FinOp project discusses. I will not keep you in suspense. I will tell you straight away what my point is. So, I will argue that financial innovation to a large extent is technological and organizational innovation at the enterprise level. So this is the point that I'm trying to make here. And then I will ask whether this type of innovation is something to do with financialization. So let's move on. Financial innovation, what people understand with it. So people are talking about mathematical formulas, the Black-Scholes equation and things like that, new types of products like CDOs, ABS, CLOs, or however they're called. New emerging markets for credit risk, so securitization markets, for example, different models, originate to distribute model and different other models, the merging of master trust structures, etc., etc. But I'm saying that this type of financial innovation, in order to be diffused at the level of financial system, technological and organizational innovations are necessary at the enterprise level. Things like that, for example. technological innovations in financial services institutions, organizations. So in banks, for example, we can see a shift from what they call legacy systems to more integrated software packages. Or the organizational aspects, we see new emerging models of organization. For example, from product-centered models to customer-focused models, etc. So let's see how these types of organizational innovation is related to innovation in the financial services, in financial markets. In the early 1990s, there was a deregulation of financial markets and the emergence of what was understood back then by industry commentators as the most serious bank crisis since the Great Depression, or the decline of banking. And with the introduction of new actors that were not banks in the financial systems, people were talking about how banking still plays an important role, but banks as organizations that define the whole sector did not anymore. So this increased competition, new types of products were emerging, new actors were entering the market, etc. So this is a situation where financial markets are changing and the financial system is being innovated in a sense. How is this happening at the level of the enterprise? So the response of financial service organizations to these changes were through organizational restructuring efforts. They were introducing new IT, for example, ERP systems. They were aiming at designing operational improvements, efficient processes with less cost. They were reorienting their business marketing strategies towards more aggressive customer-focused marketing. They were re-engineering their organizational processes. And this type of changes at the level of the enterprise became a global phenomenon. All over the world, banks were doing similar things like this. So these types of changes were seen as necessary for financial service organizations in order to become part of the changing and innovating financial system. Otherwise, they would be left out and go bankrupt or whatever. On the other hand, the IT suppliers and experts did not stay aloof. They were mobilized as well to respond to this kind of changes in the financial system. So they started offering integrated software like ERPs, which were promising operational benefits and enhanced efficiency by streamlining operations and to effectively support needs of marketing strategies through supporting product differentiation, flexible product configuration, customer relationship management, etc. So the supply and the expert sector was specifically targeting directly through technology changes in the financial system by promoting and making possible emergence of new products and new things. So this whole cycle is what I call the emergence of the agora of an organizational change, which is the emergence of on a global level, a supply-use chain for integrated technologies in financial service organizations. It's a cycle of development, distribution, implementation, and use of IT solutions in banks. Within this cycle, we have the emergence of new actors. For example, banks emerge as important users of this kind of technologies. IT firms emerge as suppliers on the supply side. Consultancies supply specialist knowledge. And all these new actors are engaged in relationships with each other and they form certain networks at the market level. So my personal work and what I did in my PhD and what I'm trying to do is to understand how this configuration, what I call agora of organizational change, how it works, what are its the dynamics that are inside it, and what does it mean for the management of information, technology, innovation, what does it mean for the managers of a specific enterprise. I will not go into details today about how I think the Agora works and how to manage it and how to engage it, because we don't have much time.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Yes.
Two questions. One is, it's not new necessarily. I mean, you've always had different types of users and suppliers and these.
No, yes.
So why do you say the emergence? Is it that the concept is new? Or that you think these interactions within a specific sector is new?
IT supply and specialist firms, etc., they existed before this, but I'm trying in this kind of story to engage with the changes in the financial system. Mm-hmm. So in this sense, and as the deregulation created certain relations, I see it as an emerging phenomenon in a sense. So yes, there were banks, they were before in existence, yes, but in this context of the story and the change in financial environment, they emerge as users of IT, as heavy users of these types of technologies on a global scale. But I see, yeah, I'm not saying that.
In terms of financial services.
Yes, this is a shift. It's new in terms of a new phase of ICT innovation in the financial services. Yeah? So, this is myself in the ancient Greek Agora in Athens, in a very sexy pose. And I'm going to tell you now about what do I think that the metaphor of the Agora as a metaphor may bring to this analysis. Oops. Okay, so Agora in ancient Athens was a space of gathering. It comes from the Greek verb agiro, which means gather or assemble. So analytically it gives us a spatiality, like it is a place, a space where things are happening. It has a material substance because there is an exchange of material products in it, but it also has a rhetorical aspect because there are, or non-material, because in this space there is a development of ideas and visions about what technologies, how can they be used, what they can do, what benefits they can bring, etc. And it's also a very political space, also in ancient Athens, because people were going there to buy food and exchanging conversations, but also they were electing their officials and their governments, etc. So it has this political characteristic. And I'm thinking here maybe it would be something to talk about inclusion and exclusion, that we've been talking lately about this, about who is excluded from it and who is not, like in the ancient Athens, for example, slaves were not part of this democratic process. So in my view, the Agora of organizational change is a socioeconomic terrain in which technological and organizational innovation in financial service organizations is happening. Okay? And again, my point here is to show how this type of innovation, which happens within this type of environment, constitutes part of the innovation of the financial markets. So let's give you some empirical stuff. This is a case study which I did for my PhD, as part of my PhD in Edinburgh, which explores the technological and organizational transformations in a Greek bank. So the regulation of the financial services hit the Greek reality as well, and the institutional specialization required by law rather than dictated by market forces was abolished in the second banking directive in 1992. In Greece, there were 7 specialized institutions, each responsible for funding different sectors. So this bank that I looked at was responsible for funding the agricultural sector. But this type of specialization was abolished with the second banking directive. So this bank, who has been since the 1920s a bank focusing on agriculture, now in order to survive, they had to become a modern commercial bank that does business in different types of sectors and also compete with other similar actors. So they were seeing this type of transformation as necessary for them in order to survive. They could not be sustained as with their previous form. So they had to develop new products, to enter new markets, but also maintain the business they had with the agricultural sector clients. So what they did was they decided to shift from a product-centered model they had to a customer-centered model. Up to 1997, when this transformation started, they had some inconsistent relations with what I call the Agora organizational change. Most of the applications they had were in-house built. But then when they decided to do this large-scale change and transform completely to a different type of bank, they decided to buy and implement software package and make organizational changes around it. So it was a 3-year timetable, the cost and the people that were involved in the project. And I've got some quotes here to give you some flavor of how this type of change was happening. So first we have the problematization of the existing condition in the bank. So the existing infrastructure, technological and organizational, was holding back the marketing development of the bank. So the bank didn't have the infrastructure to provide modern banking products, to design a banking product and offer it. We also didn't have the informational infrastructure and the process and the marketing channel to do that. So that was something that had to change. There was some inadequacy there. Organizational processes were very messy. They were not processes, organizational structure at the central level, at the branch level. They existed, but it was a chaos. Nothing was working, the situation was so twisted. And also, there were some organizational culture aspects, what they called the public servant and the corner store mentality. This had to change as well. So all these years, by serving specific customers, the bank had been adjusted to the demands of the customers, the behavior of the customers, and now there is a need for a new attitude, new personality, new mentality. The bank had never gone outside for development of its market. Today they are asked to go outside for the first time. This is a big step, it needs different kind of people. While people, the suppliers and the specialists, the consultants and the people from internal the bank, while they were setting up and organizing this type of change, there is a lot of things happening there, and I will give you some examples of the politics, for example, that were there. In the design of the new roles, for example, they had a problem with messing up the hierarchy of the organization. This organization was although it was not a public organization, the government still maintained some structures of public law in it, so messing with the hierarchy would be problematic and it would have some sort of political cost as well. So the people that were designing the changes had to be careful about that. The role of the external experts was also interesting. This is the attitude they had. the customer really knows what they want, and it makes sense. The customer wants to get as many things as possible. It's our job to explain to them that in relation to the time and the cost, this is what you can get. There is always something better, there is always something more. We did not suggest them the most sophisticated ways. We told them that in their condition they should start with something similar and then move on to something more complicated. And also there were more government level politics. And for example, the powerful relations that the general manager of the bank had with the government, the political party. So the general manager is powerful, the most powerful bonds possible with the whole specific political party. He was the law. There was no room for dispute. Whatever he was wishing, it was happening. That's simple. It's a unique case. There are 2 or 3 people that can have such access to the government. So this was the center of decision making. And he was controlling the whole situation, but as I have in other type of evidence, the general management was considered more with balancing the political cost at the broader political level. He wasn't so much concerned about the specifics of the technological and organizational. So we see this type of relationships are formed within the Agora, between suppliers and experts and people from the bank and the management and whatnot. Again, I will not go into more details. I will move on to a second study. This was a project at the LSE. It was a 1-year project where we were looking at the role of ICTs in the financial crisis, and more specifically, we were focusing on securitization. So I looked at how a UK bank built their securitization business. Securitization is another, what is considered another financial innovation. First emerged in the 70s. It was basically an invention of the US government to implement their housing policy and increase their housing stock for the baby boomer generation, to increase the rate of home ownership and to help lower income people to afford housing. So I have some evidence from a UK bank, which was the first in the UK and I think in Europe to set up a securitization transaction in 1996 through a master trust issuer. So in this particular bank, the securitization business was built on top of the already existing mortgage business, and it was a highly technological and organizational endeavor. The IT landscape, the different mortgage platforms they had were sort of fragmented. They were developed independently. Also, throughout the years, the bank was involved in various mergers and acquisitions. They were buying new platforms, etc. So there was a constant need for technological change in terms of integrating different databases and making them part of this new type of business. At first, they completed the first securitization in 1996, and the challenges back then was to prove that securitization works as a funding mechanism, to prove that the existing piece of infrastructure was functional, so this was the technological bet that they had in the beginning, and operationally to establish a mentality of data integrity independently from the lending decisions. This was a mentality they wanted to instill in their underwriters, for example, to have good data independent of what they are using them for. In 2001, they had a big IT project to integrate existing mortgage platforms into one database. So we have engagement with the Agora for organizational change. New experts are coming in, they're doing things and suggesting changes. And also, there were political barriers and issues. For example, the Treasury had to convince the other parts of the organization to do this and not go the other way around, and so on. So this was what they did. They had different platforms with mortgages here and other assets. And the first securitization, one of them platforms had inside it embedded securitization functionality. So this is where they did the first transaction in 1996. Then in 2001 they decided to integrate all these platforms into one, and they replicated the functionality for securitization from this platform. They brought it here. So whenever they wanted to securitize, they could go into here and interrogate data from all platforms. So this was some sort of an integration. Again, why am I telling you this? My point is that in order for this bank to set up this securitization business, they had to undergo a series of IT projects and engage with a broader environment of IT supply, which I call Agora of organizational change. Again, from the same research project, we reported some post-crisis debates on transparency. There's a lot of discussion post-crisis about transparency and that there is a need for more loan-level data to be available, and that investment banks should have their own credit rating models and not rely so much on rating agencies. However, this means more technological changes and organizational, and this costs a lot of money. So the investment banks currently resist this type of path. The regulators on the other side insist, okay, we should do it because we need more transparent markets, but they scale back their ambitions as well, because in utopia where everything is transparent and standardized does not exist. And also there is the other argument that the US market is much more transparent than the European one, and yet this is where the crisis started. And also, if we have data complete transparency, there will be an overload of information that people would not know what to do with all this data, which creates new informational needs and new offers of technological solutions by vendors. For example, I've had in an interview with a big rating agency, they were telling me that how they were starting now to become IT vendors. Start offering technological solutions for investors for this purpose, because if they had all this data available, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And so there is more informational needs there to be covered by technological development. A few points of discussion are coming up, or conclusions, or however you want to call them, questions. So financial innovation is to a large extent technological and organizational innovation. Technological and organizational innovation is happening within the agora of the organizational change, a highly political arena. And I'm asking, is the agora a terrain for policy development and financial regulation? Maybe we need more studies to address the role of the agora in the innovation of the financial system. Also, can we link an organizational innovation with the devastating effects of financialization? For example, has the political conflicts, the role of IT suppliers, the IT procurement choices, the democratic or not process of change, have all these things anything to do with what we call financialization? So, can a proper management of technological and organizational innovation at the enterprise level reduce the negative effects of financialization and contribute to more equitable and sustainable industrial innovation? I don't know, maybe you could help me with that. Also, I have this point about discussing in the disciplinary research and different types of methods. This type of research that I'm doing is basically qualitative ethnographic type of studies based on a case study. So maybe this type of research of methods could be combined with other methods. You could tell me a few things about this. And I think I'm done. I will open the floor now for suggestions for your contribution. Thank you.
This Agora, I think one of the I'm trying to conceptualize it. Have you ever thought of what's the difference between the Agora and say the innovation system? I guess it's more inside the firm, the Agora, or do you see it as something?
Okay.
There both have issues about boundaries.
Okay. The Agora is, in the Agora, it is a loosely bounded environment, okay? Boundaries are not very clear, and we have different actors. You know, users, suppliers,
Okay.
the state, maybe, whatever. So, in order to manage all this and create boundaries, each actor developed certain views of it, slices. Okay, this is the stuff that I left out because it was too detailed. No? So, for a single organization, for example, a user, in order to be able to make sense of it, they create boundaries and the choice becomes more particular. Okay? Because if this particular user, for example, they do not know all the suppliers in the market in order to buy technologies, or they don't know all the experts or all the possibilities, okay? But because they are embedded in certain networks, they are able to make certain choices about what technology to buy, where to buy it from, what it should do, and so on. So, for example, in this bank, they chose a particular consortium comprised with with certain firms, which, for example, the consortium leader was seen as monopolizing the projects in the public sector. So the other offers did not have much chances with this. So this is something this sort of thing is embedded in the local relations, and that's how a particular actor understands themselves as part of this Agora. The same with suppliers as well. They have certain customer networks, and this is a way to understand it. Okay? And of course, analytically, we can talk about it at a broader level. But in terms of management of technology, at the enterprise level, there is some sort of mapping that is happening.
Yeah, I mean, up until I would say half your presentation, I felt like what you were describing was, in many ways, the 1980s, you know, flexibility, if you want revolution, you didn't have just in time. And then you started talking about financial services, and it sort of seemed like you thought that then something really sort of new happened, but you didn't really talk about risk and how that was. So, put it this way, I feel like you're giving an importance to IT, which I'm not sure, that kind of feels technologically deterministic to me, because if I think of the use of IT, for example, in the whole just-in-time revolution, that had a specific goal. You know, flexibility was the goal, and IT was a tool to reach that. I kind of felt that, and maybe it's just because you condensed the presentation, but what was the goal in your view? I mean, people have different views if you want the whole financialization thing, but what was the goal that then IT was used as a tool for? Okay. You know, for example, around risk distribution within the economy.
The goal in this context that I talked about was more efficiency, less cost.
But that's also the 1980s.
It is, yes, and the integration of the processes at the organizational level. That's why we have the widespread use of integrated software packages, where they get a single view of the customer, for example. So this led to more efficient operations. Yes, I guess you could make references with the 80s and the just-in-time system and things like that. But in the context of this 1990s crisis, these were the issues that were made.
I mean, in the banking context, aren't you actually making much more complex mathematical use of the information as well? Just more efficient use of it. You might be designing complex products that use that information in a way that you couldn't do without quite as advanced software.
Well, that's a very good point, yes.
There's a similar question really about the way in which, following from Mariana's, one of the critiques surely of the crisis was that the technology and kind of modelling embedded in the kind of expertise of an Agora type kind of assemblage was that it became disembedded from the real economy in that sense. And so, in a sense, the technology did begin to drive. And you talked about this being a political sphere. One of the things surely this actually depoliticised it because it became shifted into this space that you talked about. And, it's essentially virtual. Well, it's a space of a kind of project of different consultants and organisations, which is kind of quite ephemeral, shady in the sense that you can't quite pin it down. It's kind of made with multiple actors, so that it becomes much more difficult to regulate and pin down. That was a problem with the government. They bloody missed them. The Queen. How did you miss this? It was kind of, so in a sense, it was. It seemed to me when you turned that story, I had a similar reaction to Mariana, but it was also that the technology didn't. In some senses, it wasn't just reified, it began to sort of, the tail wagging the dog in a sense. It wasn't just. So I don't know if that was the kind of. Because it wasn't kind of clear sometimes what, in terms of Mariana's question, what the technology was being used for. It seems to me if you can start beginning to kind of pinpoint clients and say, well, you're high risk, low risk, you're a loser, you're not beginning to start, difficult in terms of you can start picking your populations in certain ways. So.
It's not, I'm not sure about who caused this, who initiated this. Was it, why was the technology put at the center of this type of changes? Half of it is that they were trying to, the banks were trying to find a solution to their problems. And also, on the other side, the suppliers saw it as an opportunity to develop and sell certain types of technologies. And this, for example, ERP systems were used before in the manufacturing sector. So maybe it was another way of the IT supply to penetrate the financial services industry and dominate there as well. But you're right, these are interesting topics about how the Agora is part of the financial markets and the relations.
It's might be a dark question, it's not really my field at all, but it's interesting to see the concept of technological change shifted completely in my lifetime from things that you actually make out of physical bits of something to being largely dependent on just pure ideas, be they embodied in mathematical formulas or organisational structures. Are there big differences to you between technological change that's driven by technology or technological change that's pure ideas or social networks or something, and organisational change which is also largely ideas?
Well, this whole thing has different levels of understanding, different levels of, there are different terrains.
Do they behave in very different ways, those things?
I think there's different ways that you can use the word political, and I think you've used it in a nice way, thinking of big oil and the Greeks and stuff, but of course there's the ideology, right? So, the efficient market model, theory, whatever, is strongly ideological. And in fact, even though we like to think of, we use the word mathematics as if it actually means something, but especially the economists know that certain types of equations are basically, within economic theory at least, they look really complex, but the underlying economic outcome is, for example, Pareto optimal solutions, showing that, for example, market basis and it's absolutely the best possible system. It looks really fancy, but in the end, that's what they're saying. And I kind of feel like, and this is sort of getting back to my point of feeling it's a bit of a technologically deterministic story, that I kind of feel like it's also apolitical in that sense. That, a lot of that stuff was just, there was all sorts of assumptions about, how returns are distributed, and we know now that they screwed up, fat tails, not Gaussian bell-shaped returns, whatever. But also, that you could just call a scientific screw-up, they made a mistake. But then there's also, again, this ideological element. And I kind of feel like if you don't tell that story, you're missing a big part of the picture in terms of, again, thinking of what was the objective for which then these tools were used. I think actually Philip Morawski, you might find his stuff really interesting, his new book called Science Smart, where he actually shows that most of the scientific community, especially the science policy research community, which means a lot of the kind of people we engage with, are quite ideological. And in terms of the economic theories, or the types of mathematics and the tools that have been used by mathematical economists, which sound like, they look logical, it's software, it's computers, it's equations. It's really hard to separate that from what those equations are doing. And I think you just have to add it in, and I think it's just going to fortify your point, actually. It's just going to, it's just, you're sort of dismissing it, but it's actually going to strengthen what you're trying to say, which is about...
And also there is literature about fads, for example.
About what?
Fads.
Fads.
What is popular or not,
Yeah.
how we call it. At that point...
What, you mean behavioralism?
No. In the 90s, for example, it was very popular. This different concepts become popular. So ERP was becoming very popular. Or DPI.
But they're not popular. How can you say they're popular? Again, that's an apolitical way to talk about them. They're just popular.
No.
That sounds like there's...
Yeah, the dynamics behind it that make things become widespread. This behind it, this shows that some people have some power over, circulating and diffusing certain methods or ideas. The Hammer and Champy book about business process design became, whatever. Yes, we could ask why and how.
But it's ideological. It's ideological rather than fact.
Well, it is. In a sense, everything is ideological. Yeah?
No.
No?
When you're talking about politics...
If you say everything's ideological, that's also apolitical. It means everything's the same. It's in Italian to say qualunquista, means everything's the same. which prevents you from attacking something, because if it's all the same, then who cares?
When I talk about politics, I talk about in the sense of conflicts of interest during the project between suppliers and the people from the bank. But some people were, for example, the strategy firm did not want to give a specific. They were not willing to make a lot of changes in their plan because this meant that they will have more specifications and that they will do more work. So this type of interaction conflicts at the organizational and inter-organizational level, and also at the level of the organ of the government. So in my study, when I was talking about politics, I was referring to this inter-organizational thing and how the government was involved. Okay? I did not address the ideology of it, and you are right.
To me, what you just described is not politics, it's asymmetric information.
Okay.
That's all.
Fair enough.
But doesn't that go back to Giles' question? The reason the ideology didn't enter and the politics didn't enter was because it was just too complicated and too virtual for regulation and government policies to catch up. So, was it the globalization of it that made that too difficult, and the fact that regulation was across many different regulatory regimes, or was it just purely the abstractness and complexity of it?
No, I confess I did not think about this more meta theoretical thing that you're talking about, but I try to be based on certain literature. For example, there is a lot of literature on the political process perspectives on organization. So they talk about politics in the sense that I told you. Okay? So you have to make some choices what literature to relate to or not, but you are absolutely right about your comments about language.
Can I just ask you to talk through some of the ideas around risk and regulation, which is, you didn't talk about risk at all, and regulation, and I think it's part of the story, and maybe you didn't have time to talk about it, so I just wanted to kind of ask you to expand on that. Because I think this does tie into this regulation point you just made, which I don't buy, that governments actually can't regulate. The type of regulation changes and the ways that they can regulate changes, but I think it's a cop-out, and that's where the ideology comes in. I think it's a cop-out that, oh, we can't do anything, it's globalization, you know, which, but I think, so that's the kind of that level, but just to bring it to the level that you're talking about, if you could expand on the risk regulation relationship within both of those case studies and this Agora, because the state is in there. So obviously the state acts as a regulator as well as other things.
Okay, I'm not in any sense expert on regulation or risk, but that might be important. So,
Well, it's how it comes into your case studies is
Yes,
what I'm interested in, not an expert.
I would say, in order, for example, in terms of policy or in regulation, I'm suggesting that maybe we should, or people that do this should consider this type of environment when they are trying to regulate the financial system. Okay, that's what my point is here. That's what my suggestion is to the people. If some policy officials were here right now, I would ask them, maybe, guys, when you're designing new policy for financial policy or regulation, maybe you should think about these things as well. That's as far as I can go right now. But if I would ask you now to tell me how could I address this better, if you have some suggestions.
Well, I think it's interesting when you're doing a case study, two case studies in a comparison, to see what the differences are in the context of those two case studies. Because if we're talking about a global system of technological financial innovation, and this is not my, you know, I'm probably putting my foot in a lot of the terminology because I don't work in this area. But if you're talking about a system that is global and governments, you know, are saying they can't regulate or all of that stuff, each setting would be, you would be able to take something different out of both settings. So the setting, so as an example, in Canada, where you were, the Canadian banks fared a lot better during the financial crisis than did the American banks, than did a lot of other banks. As did the Greek banks. The Greek banks, with all of Greece's problems, are actually the most stable thing in the country right now. So what's the, why? And what is it about this Agora that ties into that? So that, I mean, that's where my question was coming from.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm not sure I know how to answer it.
But how does your research tap into that at all? Because you're talking about securitization of mortgages. So that's obviously, you know, that's a key contributor to the financial crisis. And that's one context, so there's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to this I would explore, for example, whether the technological and organizational changes in the securitization that support securitization, if there was something there that was directing the securitization as a funding mechanism to do certain things or others. I would tell you that I would have to do more research on these to answer these questions. I wouldn't really know what to tell you. But yeah, there is this distinction between there is the technological organizational infrastructure, and there is also the business development and how these two relate, for example.